obviously there is some truth to it. And this is such a great thing that I think Matthew Walker is the name of the guy. He's making people aware of sleep, etc. And of course, I mean, it's a great thing, but there is this, I remember when I was a kid in the 90s, there was this huge thing about fat not being good. Or they used to say another thing, that this was really, really good. I mean, he's a great guy and he has great intentions, nothing to question his motives, but I would be little careful. I would take the advice, and obviously sleep is natural, so very important. And I think, like with everything else, you have to take the advice and you have to personalize it. You have to make it suit it, or you have to adapt it so that it suits you. Same with sleep. You have to find out what works for you and then probably do that. Not take any advice with closed eyes or mind. But great clip, no doubt. I think you should check out The Scientist. And as always, Joe Rogan has great guests. Great guests. Let's start.
They don't, and it's not their fault either. And in fact, I've started to try and lobby doctors to start prescribing sleep. And don't make the mistake that that's
prescribing sleep.
Me suggesting, prescribing sleeping pills. That's a separate story. Sleeping pills are associated with significantly higher risk of death and cancer, and I'm happy to speak about that too. It was the one chapter in the book that I think the legal team of my publisher took.
The one problem with these videos or with these advices or any life advice or motivation advice is that once you start implementing it, the things that are worrying you, so let's say you're not able to sleep because you want to be successful, something like that. Let's say you want to be really successful and that is what is causing you lack of sleep. Or let's say you have an injury that is not getting healed, which is causing you stress and insomnia, anxiety, etc. And that's why you're not able to sleep. When you start sleeping, listening to all this, when you start sleeping, the basic problem still remains. And so after a few days, you look back and you're like, oh, even though I'm doing the correct thing, this is not getting resolved. So why do it? And then that disconnect happens and you just go off the rails again. And that's where the analytical mind has to come into play and say, no, wait, I'm doing the right thing. These two are unrelated. If I don't sleep, it will cause me further problems. Let me not aggravate the existing problem. And let me try and find solution for that.
Took a very long look at, but I think doctors, to come back to your point, they on average only have about 2 hours of sleep education in the medical curriculum. So 1/3
2 hours.
2 hours. 1/3 of their
This podcast has been 2 hours.
Yeah,
that's fucking crazy. So
isn't that frightening?
That's terrifying, and I bet you probably have laid things out better in this podcast than you would get in those 2 hours of education.
Medical profession, they're talking about sleeping. I mean, there is something to be said, obviously, about the scientific approach, about research, about things which are important. But I think there is also something to be said about knowing yourself, understanding what works for you, what puts you in a good mood, what is enjoyable to you. And I think you should build on that. There is so much advice out here. They said fats were bad and they just went crazy. Now everything is about good fat. They used to say protein is bad. Now everything is about protein. I mean, I would say, I'm not saying that sleep is bad, but I'm just saying that look at your life and use it accordingly.
I don't know about that, but I think
I'll give you that credit.
If they could increase that, I'm desperately appealing for this. It's 1/3 of their patient's life, but they only get 2 hours of education. But the other problem is the medical industry itself, by the way. Their residents, that data, junior residents working a 30-hour shift are 460% more likely to make diagnostic errors in the intensive care unit relative to when they're working 16 hours. If you have elective surgery, you should ask your surgeon how much sleep they've had in the past 24 hours. If they've had 6 hours of sleep or less, you have a 170% increased risk of a major surgical error, such as sort of organ damage or hemorrhaging.
Such a beautiful point. Such a beautiful point.
Relative to that same surgeon if they had been well rested. And then the irony here, by the way, is that when a resident finishes a 30-hour shift, gets back into their car to drive home, there is a 168% increased risk that they will get into a car accident because of their underslept state, ending up back in the same emergency room where they just came from, but now as a patient from a car crash. You know, we need to radically rethink the importance of sleep in education, in business, in the workplace, and in medicine too.
I think in the future there's going to be, especially I think in the tech industry, or you know, these industries where it's a lot about work-life balance, which are really good at these things. I think there's going to be this parameter where they're going to talk about, because I see mental health and physical health being taken up so seriously in all these big companies, MNCs, and I really think that there's going to be a day where, along with how many hours you have worked, you would have to log in how many hours you have slept. I think there is going to be a day where companies do that, because if you're able to sleep well, it is probably a very good indicator that you have a lot of things under control. A lot of important things. May not be everything, but a lot of important things that are required to live properly.
Ew.
Why do they do that to residents?
It's a fascinating story. So there's a chapter here in the book on this too. It's a guy called William Halsted, and he set up the first resident surgical program in the United States at Johns Hopkins University. And he was known for being able to stay awake for these heroic lengths of time, days on end. It's incredible.
Somebody did it and messed it up for the entire...
Incredible, like superhuman strength. Turns out that in later years after he died, there was a dirty secret that he was actually a cocaine addict.
That son of a bitch.
And here's what happened. It wasn't his fault. Early in his career, he was examining the anesthetic capacities of cocaine. So, you know, well, I'm not going to say, you know, you may have heard from perhaps colleagues that when you snort cocaine, you get a numb face. The reason is because it blocks nerves.
I like how you said from colleagues. My colleagues have told me. I've actually never done cocaine, but I've known quite a few people who have.
And they will, you know, they'll have this sort of numbness. The reason is because cocaine is also a nerve-blocking agent.
Yeah, like lidocaine.
Lidocaine,
Yeah.
exactly.
We talked about this yesterday, ironically, on the podcast, and about doctors becoming drug addicts. The initial doctors that started doing lidocaine.
Halsted was one of them.
Yes,
And
that's
so
right.
No doubt, JRE is such a huge podcast. I mean, people are huge fans of this. Look at the range of topics. I've seen MMA fighters, I've seen Elon Musk, I've seen somebody who is an expert on sleep. They invite everybody. I've seen Andrew Schultz, so yeah.
He became an accidental cocaine addict.
Wow.
And then
so that's why he was up for days.
He was up for days, and he structured a program where he expected his residents to match him, to go toe-to-toe with him for each hour that he would remain awake.
Yeah, that sounds like what a cokehead would do. Come on, man, stay awake.
Unbelievable. And
nightmare if your boss is someone like this.
I think the story was that he actually knew that it was a problem. He went to rehabilitation, checked in under a different surname, and one part of the regimen for him coming off cocaine was to prescribe morphine. And at the end of the rehabilitation program, he came out with both a cocaine addiction and a heroin addiction.
Oh my God.
And so now there's rumors, you know, that he would get his shirts laundered in Paris, you know, in France. And, you know, they would come back, and it wasn't just the white starch, you know, shirts that were in the box. There were other white substances too. But that's, you know, you ask a great question. Where did that come from? Where's that history? The legacy seems to date back to William Halsted, who was an accidental cocaine addict. And there we have then maintained that inhumane practice in medicine.
Which is like so critical, to be awake and aware and to be sharp. You're cutting people open. You're operating on people.
And think back to what we said, you know, about being awake. You know, you would never accept treatment from a doctor who started, you know, looking at your child who's sick, with an appendicitis at 3 a.m. in the morning who then swigs some whiskey and says, yeah, I'm going to do the operation, it's fine. You would go ballistic.
Right. Yeah.
Well, why do we accept treatment? You know, after 20 hours of being awake, you're as impaired as you would be if you were legally drunk. So unfortunately, we placed young residents in this position.
See, amazing point. I mean, I'm not going to watch the entirety of it. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to look at the comments, but amazing point that he has made. I hope any one of you is struggling with sleep, prioritize your sleep. There are so many tricks and tips out there, but I think the basic has to be that you make a decision to sleep early and you know why you want to sleep early. And obviously the things going on in your head, you can look back at your life and see that they have been there all along. So why not just sleep? And it has to be as simple as that. If we make a complicated thing, probably it will become even more difficult. Let's look at some of the comments. I've never understood sleep deprived mentality of ER admins. Nurses, doctors should be required to go home after 11 hours of work. Yeah, everybody, especially in medical field. I mean, you are playing with people's lives. Fascinating stuff. Totally concur with what they're saying about medical residents. When I was in the Navy, even during heavy training sessions, simulating battle conditions, minimum was 8 hours on, 8 hours off. Need for sleep and relaxation was paramount to our success as a unit. Why the medical profession would make a resident endure 30 hours on is mind-numbingly stupid. These are critical jobs with life-altering consequences. Major changes needed, of course. And how come this is not common sense, right? You look at some of these things and you think, why this isn't common sense? This should be normal. In Air Force, we have to have commander approval for a 12-hour shift. But after 16 hours, we are no longer responsible for our own actions. Do you want an aircraft mechanic that has been in the heat for 20 hours fixing a critical problem? Exactly. For your next flight. Anyone else watching this at 3 a.m. when you should be asleep? After 20 hours of being awake, you are as impaired as you would be if you were legally drunk. Matthew Walker. Now that's a mind-blowing fact. Legally drunk and people yet drive and live their life. So this statement, as true and as eye-opening it is, also tells you why it is so acceptable, because people are legally drunk all the time, so many times rather, and they still continue on with their life like it is nothing. It's strangely comedic to me to imagine that people disliking this video are anti-sleep activists. No sleep all day, throw your pillows away. Advocating for more sleep is something I can get behind. I spent 3 years working as an EMT on 24-hour schedules. They would regularly drag on to 26 and sometimes 30-hour shifts due to extra calls. I also worked in a hospital, and the fact of the matter is that we are short-handed as hell for good people right now. And it's terrifying fact that the results in most of us just having to handle life-saving situations under immense levels of sleep deprivation. Most of us just go straight to chain smoking and drinking caffeine by gallon. Yeah, caffeine addiction. Blowing our personal health off to help patients. And that's just expected at almost any healthcare job. All you guys who are not in healthcare industry, you guys are lucky. Thank you, lucky stars. It's absolutely vital and crucial for Joe to have people like this on his podcast. Not only are we being enlightened, but this information could legitimately save yours or a loved one's life. Very grateful for some of the guests on here. I think this should be mandatory, right? People, doctors or surgeons who are going in for important life-altering surgeries or something that has a potential risk, they make you sign those consent forms. I think doctors should be asked to sign something like that as well, that I've slept more than 8 hours or 10 hours, I have no physical problems, etc., etc. This guy, 1 in 20 will kill a patient. Rogan, if you have 100, they'll kill 5. Quick maths. This is common sense. I always hated the sleepless rhetoric. I sleep from 10 to 5:30 a.m. and I love every second of it. Great guy. Alright, ever since I found Matthew Walker, I've been trying to get at least 8 hours of sleep, and wow, I've been seeing major results. My grades and my focus have been at their highest. Exactly. Also, all of you night owls who are sleep deprived, try and prioritize sleep. Even Joe Rogan and Matthew Walker are saying so. I hope you prioritize sleep and you rest and give your mind a rest. Keep your problems aside. Try to hang up the overthinking mind for at least 7 to 8 hours every day, so that you can get proper sleep, because if you do, you'll feel so happy and rejuvenated. This coming from someone who sleeps less, to be very, very all right. I loved making this video. I never thought I would make a video like this. I would watch something like this, but really fascinating, interesting stuff. Podcasts are the future, no doubt. Let me know, how many hours of sleep are you getting? Are you getting the recommended 7 or 8 hours, or are you someone who goes by on 5 to 6 hours of sleep? Let's talk more in the comments. Take care. Bye-bye.